What's up, you creepy fucks? Welcome to the Let's Talk Horror Channel podcast, and welcome to the Creep Zone, where we have in-depth, very honest, unrated, unfiltered conversations about something from the world of horror. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, hang on, like you're doing an episode about the Terminator. That's not a horror film. Well, guess what? It fucking is, and I don't give a fuck what you say. But we're going to talk about why it's a horror film. So if you don't think it is one, then maybe watch this and then go, yeah, they are right. And then at the end of it, if you still think we're wrong, you're wrong. Get over it. But yes, so obviously we're talking about the Terminator, an absolute iconic movie. And with me to talk about the Terminator, I have somebody that I absolutely bloody love talking to. Someone that every time I speak to him, I get really confused because, as everybody knows, as you can see, Brett Parker is on the show. So Brett Parker is my Brett Parker brother from America. It still confuses me. Even now, I can't even get the words out of my mouth properly because it's just fucking weird to me. But Brett Parker is also a podcaster over there in the in America. And it's a bloody pleasure to have him on the show once again. Hello, Brett. No, it's weird. I don't like it.
I don't use my first name often, so it's definitely weird. That's why. What's going on, BP? It's so great to be here again to talk about one of my favorite movies of all time. Again, awesome. Because we talked about The Shining last time, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. So to be back to talk about another one.
Yeah,
let's keep going.
That's it. Well, we just know that every time you come on, we've got to talk about one of your favorite movies of all time, as we know.
Like, how many favorites does this guy have? And it's like a lot of them.
Exactly. We get to like episode 100, and everybody's just like, "There's too many favorites. There's too many favorites." But to be fair, though, I'm like that as well. Like, I could go, "That's one of my favorite movies," and then 1,000 films later, I'm still on my favorite movies, so there's too many of them. But Parker, I'll call you. I'm going to call you Parker. That's easy for me. But Parker is one of the co-hosts from the Dissect. Dissect the film. Why can't I say Dissect?
It's okay. You are not the only person who has flubbed the name of the show. It's Dissect that film.
Dissect. That's what in my head I had. Dissect.
You can't say the name fast because I've actually
that's why
fucked up saying it many times in my intros. If you say it too fast, it's just your tongue just can't keep up. So it's okay.
That's it. Yeah. So there we go. So that's what I'm blaming it on. My slow brain, as per usual, not understanding anything. But anyway, look. Everybody knows by now, look, that's where Parker's from. He's going to, anyway, you'll know at the end because he's going to promote the absolute shit out of it at the end. So stay tuned for that because then you can find out where everything Dissect that film is. I don't even know if I said it quick again.
You said it right. You said it. That was
what
great.
What the fuck is wrong with me? There's something fucking wrong with me.
Listen, like I said, you're not the only one. It happens to me too. And I've been doing this thing for 3 years and I've had to say the name 1,000 times. So
it's good to know I'm not the only one. Thank God. But yeah, so as I said, we're here to talk about the Terminator and what an absolute iconic movie it is. So it was released in 1984, directed by big time Hollywood man James Cameron. Who's made, some of the biggest movies after this and after Terminator 2 and, Titanic, True Lies, the Blue
Aliens.
Smurf movies, Aliens, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
The Underwater Smurfs, I can't remember what it's called. What the
Avatar?
fuck is it called? That's
Avatar?
That's it, the Underwater Smurf movies.
I like the Underwater Smurfs movies.
People are like, Underwater Smurf movies.
What is he talking about? Don't worry about it.
That's right. I couldn't remember them, but I mean, I don't like them anyway. But yeah, James Cameron, he's fucking made loads of them. It's starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Oh, I missed the opportunity to do an impression. I'm sure I'll do it later. Linda Hamilton, Michael Bain. I don't know.
I think it's Bean.
Yeah, we say it is.
I think you got it right first time. Yeah.
Yeah, we say it. And then loads of other people are in it as well. They pop up, like Bill Paxton pops up in it for a second. Lance Henriksen pops up.
I had to rewind my movie. I had to rewind it because we were watching that scene with Bill Paxton, and my wife's like, she's like laughing at it. She's like, is that a skid mark on his face? I was like, yeah. And I was like, did you recognize who that was? I was like, that was Bill Paxton. She's like, rewind that now. I need to see. And she's like, oh my God.
That's it, legendary. The only man, now I've got to try and remember this, the only man in movies to have been killed by a Terminator, an Alien, and a Predator.
Yes.
So, absolute fucking legend.
Mm-hmm.
R.I.P. Bill Paxton and oh no, he didn't get killed by a Twister, but he was near one.
No, he fought that Twister. With
he just had a fist fight with it. That's it. He survived it, but he couldn't survive the rest. But yeah, Lance Henriksen is in this as well. I might have a fact in here about Lance Henriksen and his sort of part of this movie of what it may have originally been as well. Obviously, people will probably know. Nothing that I know or put out there is something that is exclusive to me. Like, I wasn't fucking there. I didn't know this shit, but I found it on somewhere, Wikipedia or Google or something. But there's some facts and stuff later on anyway. This is mad as well. IMDb 8.1, which obviously it deserves. Anything over 6% or 6, whatever it is absolutely mad. But it still sits at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes,
wow.
which is obviously, Rotten Tomatoes. It's not exactly prestigious, but that's what everybody goes off now.
Yep.
But if you're looking at this movie, 100%, that's still absolutely fucking brilliant.
Yeah, it's wild, especially when people. The funniest thing is people when you talk about the Terminator franchise, it's always T2. Like, people just talk about T2. It's the best of the franchise. Blah blah blah. It's like, okay, I appreciate that, but like, we really need to talk more about this first one, because what they did in that first one is just masterful for the budget they had and all that stuff. So like, T2 needs to take a break, and everybody's like you can love it. I love it. BP loves it. Like, we love T2, but T1, man, people need to show more appreciation for it.
Oh yeah, and that's why I know that I've got the right person on this episode, because that's something I'm going to be talking about. You'll talk about, because this is a movie that I think does need a little bit more love. Not that it's not universally loved anyway, but you're right. Does it? It sort of lives in the shadows of T2, and sometimes you can look at that as rightly so. Especially when T2 is the sequel that every sequel should strive to be.
Right.
But
I mean, that's James Cameron, though. Like, he was so masterful with sequels. Like, he took, we ran into the same thing with Alien. Like, Alien is this dark, haunting, like haunted house type movie,
suspense,
where it's
horror. Yeah.
Where then Aliens came out, directed by James Cameron, and it was an action movie. It was an action movie with the xenomorphs. It's aliens, so you're getting more of them, and it was just this big, and that's the same thing where people kind of. I mean, Alien, I feel, is talked about more than the Terminator, but Aliens is definitely the one that's most talked about in that franchise. It's like, okay, we get it, guys, but Alien, that movie rocks, man.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a horror movie.
And what's great about like these sort of movies, when you have like Terminator and Terminator 2 and Alien and Aliens, there's so many different people have their own preferences. So like, for me, Alien is the one that is for me. I like the same Aliens, way. But Alien is the movie for me. Alien is about almost as perfect as you can possibly get as a movie for me. And I love Aliens, but I'm always going to go to Alien. And the older I get, and that's why I'm really looking forward to going into this, the older I get, the more I'm thinking about Terminator within those respects as well. So I'm really excited about getting into it and having a conversation. As usual on these conversations, if you've watched them before or listened to them, I haven't got a fucking clue what I'm going to say. So I literally could say anything. And then it's almost as if I'm sort of working it out as I go through these conversations in regards to how I feel about these movies, and even talking about them. What I'm saying, and with other people, my guests, it's cool because then I can take a different perspective sometimes and look at things different. And that's why these episodes are so exciting. And I think having an episode about Terminator is definitely one of those movies where you can have those really fun conversations that you don't know where it's going to go, and sheds a different light on certain things that hopefully whoever's watching or listening may or may not know. We'll soon find out. Either that
Yeah.
or you know, I'm going to be talking shit and no one gives a fuck. But Google synopsis wise, the Terminator, a cyborg assassin from the future, attempts to find and kill Sarah Connor, a waitress who is destined to give birth to a man who will save humankind from extinction. That's pretty much it. Episode over. We don't need that. That's pretty much it. Before we get into the movie itself, one of the things that I always like to ask my guests, bearing in, you know, with this, if it's a new movie, it don't make sense, but this is from the 80s. Can you remember when you first saw the Terminator?
Oh, I was really young. I was probably 5 or 6 when I first saw this movie. It was
Blimey.
just, I don't remember if it was one of the movies that I had seen with my grandma or if it was one that my dad would had rented once. And I just remember being in absolute awe, you know, with just the sheer violence of it and Arnold Schwarzenegger just being terrifying. And that score is just so 80s. I think it was like
Yeah.
one of my early introductions to like a rated R 80s movie because I had seen many 80s movies before that. You know, I was shown like Gremlins and Goonies really early in my life. So to get like the opportunity at a very young age to watch a rated R, you
You're
know,
like, hell
80s
yeah.
movie, you're just like, oh my. You know, because my dad was one of those guys. My dad's one of those guys who just didn't care. He was like, "It's a
Yeah, yeah,
movie, you know, it's a
yeah,
movie," and like, yeah, it has nudity in it. It's like, you know, it doesn't last that long, but it was just so like visceral to the point where I was like, when my dad was like, "There's another one," and I went, "There's another one," because at that time T2, I was born in '91, so I was born when T2 came out, so it was probably like the late '90s when I started getting into like when I was able to watch some of these movies. So when he told me there was a sequel, I was like, "Can we watch that like now,
yeah,
please?" So it's one of those movies where I had to watch both T1 and T2 back to back every time I'd watch it. If I watched Terminator 2, I had to immediately watch Terminator. Or if I watched Terminator, I immediately had to watch Terminator 2 because it just, again, just like I've talked about with other kind of like The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, I always watch those back to back every time when I was a kid. And like Alien and Aliens, I always watched those back to back when I was growing up. And so this was definitely just so memorable. Like it was never like, oh, I'm just gonna watch T2. Like, no, I had to watch the Terminator, man. You have to. You can't just jump into T2. You gotta watch T1 because it's so different if you think about it too. Just the way that things are, and as a kid, you're just like. And then as you grow up and kind of evolve with the movie, it's just like you get to pick up on different things and appreciate more. Because as a kid, you don't pick up on a lot of stuff. You're just like, that's
yeah.
really cool. He's doing he killed a lot of people in there. That's insane. I've never seen that before. And he's like tearing dudes' hearts out, and you're like, what is happening? And then as you get older, you just appreciate things a little bit more, like the technical side of things, especially
Yeah.
watching more behind the scenes stuff and all that. It's just like, yeah, the Terminator was definitely a staple with my dad growing up because my mom definitely wouldn't have let me watch this at 5 or 6 years old.
That's it. Yeah, it is one of those things that is incredibly difficult that I almost get like an itch, also to speak, that when like even when I was watching Terminator for prep for this, and even though it was only say like a couple weeks ago, I went and watched it in like this special sort of screening, like on a big screen sort of thing. And that was awesome to go and watch that. But then I was just like, I'm still going to watch it again to do the prep for this, even though I don't need to, because I'm like, it's one of those movies I've seen so many times. We know it
Yeah.
beat by beat. We don't need to, but it's still enjoyable. But even then, the other day, I was just like, and we ended up being like 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, I mean, I could still watch Terminator 2. And I had to like force myself. And I was like scratching. I was like, oh, I need to watch it, but I didn't. But you're right. Like they work so well together in so many different ways. And like you're saying, they're so different, but they're such a great companion partnership where you want to watch them both together and enjoy it and explore them. But it is but Terminator is interesting because I actually watched Terminator 2 before I watched Terminator. So I think I was about 14 when I watched the first Terminator. Um, because I got it the first time I had watched it was on DVD. So I watched it on DVD when I was around 14, and I'd watched Terminator 2 when I was really young. And if I can find it with the power of editing, not that anybody will know this if you're listening to it on audio, but for the video version only, I'm going to try and put up on the screen the picture of me that was probably 92, something like that. I don't know, but very early. And I'm there rocking full on Terminator 2 t-shirt, like a black bomber jacket, like full on like 90s Zach Morris style aesthetic. Like I've just like come off the set of Saved by the Bell, and I've got like a gold chain and everything. Like I was living the fucking dream. But what I love about that photo is that I remember it because I wanted that t-shirt, and my mum brought it for me because I loved Terminator 2. So I grew up with Terminator 2. It wasn't until I was around 14 or so that I watched the first Terminator, and straight away I was just like, oh, okay, I think Terminator 2 is the one for me. But as I've got older, and like you were saying, rightly so, and also, you know, going through my journey as wanting to be a filmmaker and an actor and so on, that the technical aspect of the first one, of what they achieve, what you see on screen, which is obviously what we're going to get into as well. I think that for me, I really underestimated that as a teenager, and I really pushed that aside. For my love for Terminator 2, I didn't give it enough attention as I should have back then to understand how incredible this movie is for the time and for what it was back then and what it is now. So it's nice now being older and taking that time to pay the respect to the movie and going, fuck me, like this is insanely good. Not just as a movie, but like everything that goes into it. Like you said as well, behind the scenes, how it all did this. And it is one of those things that changed cinema, or helped change cinema for the better in the 80s. And yet, once again, like, is it being spoken about in that respect as much as it should be, when once again, is it in the shadow of Terminator 2, like we've already sort of mentioned? So
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie is definitely a must watch every year for me. Like, I love
Yeah.
watching this. I love watching Alien, because especially around, you know, spooky season, like I love clumping it in with like what people would consider real horror movies, compared to these two, which are always debated on whether or not they are. You know, I've had the conversation of like, you know, is Jaws a horror movie? And it's like, yeah, because
Yeah.
it literally made people not want to go in the water. So if that was what was
Yeah.
going on, 100% it's a horror movie. Like, you can't tell me it's not, when that was happening back then, you know. And so, and just like the atmosphere of this movie, the griminess of this movie. I mean, this movie came out in
Yeah.
'84, so it was a very low budget movie. You know, this was James Cameron before he was James Cameron. Like,
Yeah.
this was early. This was like James Cameron coming off of being fired for making a Piranha sequel.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
That's
know,
it.
and this movie was spawned from like a nightmare he had, and
Yeah.
it's just a wild story. And so, like, this is early Cameron, where you know, and to be honest, I've never hated any of his movies. You know, I've always appreciated what what he's been able to do in the film industry, and kind of the evolution of this just beautiful CGI work, which, you know, take it or leave it. You can hate CGI or not, but like, it is integral to movie making nowadays. You know, we do love our practical effects, and we get a lot of that in the Terminator. We get a lot of that in Aliens. And, you know, it's not like he's always, the thing about James Cameron, he's always evolving, and he
Yeah.
stated it. He's like, I don't want to sit in one corner and just do this one thing. Like, I did those things back then, you know, that we
Yeah.
have to evolve with the times. And so, like you said, you don't like the Avatar movies. I appreciate the Avatar movies. I don't think they're great. I don't think they're as spectacular as I think the box office has you know, displayed, or what some people might say about them. And but I think as a visual spectacle, they are beautiful. Like Way of Water was just like, how is this even possible that we could do something like this, where it's like it looks so real, like it looks like I could literally go up to an actual Navi person and shake their hand. But so I think that's what we have to really appreciate about James Cameron, is the fact that he has been able to evolve throughout his career. And taking the opportunity of being fired from Piranha 2, The Spawning. He was fired from that movie, and to then give us the Terminator. And we can't just give him all the credit. Gale Ann Hurd is a big integral part to his early successes. With the Terminator and Aliens, like she was right there by his side. I mean, I think they were married for a bit as well, so it was like they were a great partnership. And I think his storytelling kind of took a dip when she left and did her own thing. But they're still, I guess, great friends, and you could definitely tell that they were a great team, because the storytelling and what they were able to do with I'm gonna talk about the Terminator, but I also want to like throw Aliens in there a little bit, just because those were like two huge movies for him. Those were the movies that put him like out there to the point where he could make his Terminator sequel. He could do True Lies, like doing a movie that like no one expected him to do. That's why he could, and to be honest, it all led to Titanic. Like all of these movies, like that was his ultimate goal. He had been wanting to do that since the 80s. So to finally so you have to throw Terminator's success in there as well, and be like, you can hate James Cameron, you really can, but that man he's a genius. Like he really is.
He is.
He's done some insane things in his career to get to where he is. I mean, the dude literally is just like, you know what? I think today I'm going to go down in a sub and go down and visit the Titanic for the 1,000th time. I can just do that because I'm James Cameron. You're like, all right, cool. See ya.
I make zillions of money, dollars and everything like that. I'm the richest man alive. He's not, but he might as well be. But yeah, you're right. I think the thing with James Cameron is that, like, even on set, not a lot of people like him. Even off set, not a lot of people like him. Like you said, he's been fired. But I always look at James Cameron, irrelevant of him as a person. James Cameron is a pioneer. Like that's what James Cameron is. He's helps every movie he creates. He's creating the future for cinema. Whether you like it or not, or whether you like the end product. Like, for example, like I've already said, Avatar movies, it's not for me. It's just basically Pocahontas underwater with Smurfs. But it's not, it doesn't feel original and stuff, but he's helping almost create a new way of telling cinema. And that is something that you can't ever take away from James Cameron. I mean, look, I don't like Titanic. Like, it's not my type of movie. But I can still sit here and appreciate that he created something that we had never really seen before. And something that works naturally so incredibly. Like, you can watch these, like, amazing behind the scenes of Titanic. Not that I want to go much into Titanic, but there were so many incredible practical things that they created for the first time on set of Titanic. Like, there's so many scenes where everything is flooding and the waves are coming in and stuff like that. And so much of that is real, but it seamlessly works with anything that's CGI that for the time shouldn't have been possible. But he's there pioneering that. And that's when you start thinking about his stuff like Avatar and Titanic and everything like that, then you start going backwards to Terminator, and you start going, okay, like even back then, he was still pioneering. He was still creating something fresh and new for cinema, because the Terminator could have been one of those, on the books, synopsis-wise, could have been one of those really shitty 80s movies that had nothing to it apart from someone blowing the shit out of everything. And we would have probably enjoyed it because it would have been one of those movies that was so bad it was good. But this movie, without going into fucking loads of it already and just going, there we go, we've done the episode. But this movie is truly a technical masterpiece that, once again, if James Cameron hadn't been behind the wheel, it's like when you get, people like John Carpenter creating something like Halloween. Like, if you don't have somebody who understands filmmaking on a technical level to accomplish something that they know is going to be something that's a pioneer, and something that's going to reinvent cinema or reinvent like a movie, or even the movie that they're doing that itself, like Halloween, doing things differently. If you don't have somebody that is willing to take the chances that they do on a technical level, you don't end up having movies like the Terminator. And that's what's incredible about James Cameron, is that whether you like him or whether you don't, you can't lessen his impact on cinema, because he's driven so much into it, and obviously that's paid out in numbers, because every single movie he makes now is fucking a fortune for cinema.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about Cameron is he always knows who to bring on. He brings in the right pieces to complete the puzzle. And I think, when he was doing, because he's a product, I think he was a product of Roger Corman, if I trying to remember. I believe he was one of the many products of Corman, which, there's so many of them. But
Yeah,
because I believe the Piranha 2 was a Corman
I
production.
think so. Yeah, I think you're right.
And so I don't think he had he didn't have total control over that movie. And I think that's Cameron's biggest thing, is he needs to have total control, because if he doesn't, then it's like, you're not going to get the full Cameron out of this movie.
Yeah.
And yes, I have seen a lot of interviews on like the makings of Alien. I know with Terminator, I know it wasn't as bad because it was Cameron's like first huge movie. Even though it wasn't a huge movie, the budget wasn't big for the Terminator, so it was kind of an indie movie at the time. I think Orion had picked it up, so it had some sort of a decent production company behind it. But I know I've heard interviews with people who worked with him on Aliens, especially a lot of the British crew, because it was all filmed over there, and they were just like, yeah, he just was demanding, and he's like, because they had worked with Ridley Scott, because he took a lot of the crew from Alien to go do Aliens, and it was like, we're British, we got to have our tea times, we got to do this and that, we have a lot of just times where we're just chilling. It's like, Cameron wants to work, but I mean, that's what they were saying, like it was the. And so they're like, yeah, he just wanted to constantly be doing things. And it's like, so he had a real, like, there was a lot of tension with his crew there. But like, I know with the Terminator, it was a lot of American crew. So it was a little bit of a different experience. He was kind of just, his first big movie. It's his work. It's his writings along with Galen Hurd. And, things were just he had full control, so every bit of this movie has got James Cameron's fingerprints all over it. There's not many spots where you're just like, that doesn't feel like a Cameron shot. Like, nah, he did that shot. Like, he did all these things. Like,
exactly. And in this movie, for good or for bad, you're right, it's still James Cameron. He's still taking risks. He's still doing things his own way, and he's this is. What I like about Cameron as well is that he seems to learn from his mistakes as well. Like, even though he might be, one of those people that might not show it potentially and might not show that he's listening or learning, you can tell that he definitely is, because obviously there is some things within Terminator that definitely look and may feel dated. But that he's one of those people that will look at those things and go, yeah, we could have done that better. But we did what we could. On to the next thing where I can do it better, and I learn from it, and that's what's cool about Cameron. But yeah, so the movie itself, if you didn't get it from the Google synopsis, is pretty simple. You got a Terminator and another guy who basically go back in time. Basically, they've come from the future, where in the future everything's fucked. Computers. The cyber war is real, it's happening, and we're probably going to get that in real life in the next 5 years or so. James Cameron was fucking right all along. That he's going to be laughing in his bunker somewhere. But yeah, and that's it. So, but obviously, the person that really in this movie is going to be one of the people that helps save the existence in the future is Sarah Connor. She is going to be having a kid in the future called John Connor. Which obviously a highly familiar name if you watch Terminator 2. And Carl Reese is sent back in time to protect her, to save her from the T-800. It's the T-800, isn't it? I think so.
Yeah.
disguised as Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that's pretty much all the movie. You go on this essentially survival story for Sarah, for Carl Reese, and it ends up being, what it is. But obviously this movie, there's so much to go into detail, and you did mention it a little bit earlier. One of the things that I do, and we might as well start with this as well, is the music. I love the fact that obviously this music is so synth, so 80s. It works so well with the movie, but what I did want to say is that the theme to this, the classic Terminator theme, that obviously stayed on, a little bit of a revamp in the second one, is one of the themes that ever since I was a kid has played constantly in my head for so
I'm right there
fucking
with you.
long. Like, it's that and Jurassic Park are the themes that, like, I will literally wake up in the morning sometimes and I will just be like dun 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 in my head, and I'm like, fuck's sake, like, not again. Like, it's just constant. And like, even my daughter now, every now and again I hear her come through the door like dun 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 dun, and I'm like, oh no, like, it's hereditary, it's like fucking happened. But like, yeah, you mentioned it earlier, the music in this is great and it works like really well with the because this is a very dark movie and it's a very serious movie. There's very few moments of comic relief or anything that's funny in this movie, unless it's with Lance Henriksen and the Chief. I can't remember the Chief's name, but Lance Henriksen. They have the odd moment where they're saying some pretty funny things, and you're like, okay, there's that. But the intensity of this movie is pretty much throughout the whole of it. Is like, you're absolutely exhausted when you finish watching this movie, because you're like, fuck, like, it's one of those movies that gives you like a proper tight chest no matter how many times you've watched it. But this is once again another example of how important music and a score is to a movie, because it does that expertly in this movie, where that really helps, like, the tension, the dread, and the terror that's going on in the movie. You feel that through the music, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
why I like. Yeah, it's just so, I'm glad you mentioned it, because that's, one of the things, obviously it always sort of gets overlooked a lot in movies, is the score and how important it is. But this has got one of the score and music in this is one of the best integrations to a movie, in my view, probably ever. Not the top, but one of them that has parallels to everything that happens in the movie, if that makes
Oh,
sense.
oh, absolutely. Brad Fidel, who did the score,
Yes, yeah.
his Terminator theme is one of the most iconic themes of all time, and it's not just that initial piece; it's
Yeah, yeah.
that like intense, because it's supposed to sound like they're building a
Metal,
Terminator.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so but then you get that like,
That's it.
and
And it
it's
goes a
like,
little bit
and
sexy, yeah.
yeah, and I get like goosebumps every time I hear it. Like, and the great thing about it is Brad Fidel came back for the sequel, and he made it better. Like,
Yes.
I
Yeah, he
love
did.
the theme in this movie because it's that classic synth, and it fits really well for the the situation of this movie. But boy, he takes it up a notch, man, and in Terminator 2, and you're just like, that's my favorite version of the theme, but I love this classic, this original one. And I just love that it's just that synth throughout the entire thing. You get like a little bit of like something else when
Yeah.
you first meet Sarah and she's riding her scooter. It's like broad daylight, and you got to have this, like, it kind of sounds like a sitcom. You're like, what is
Yeah, like,
going on here?
everything's all right until everything's
Yeah.
fucked.
But man, when it's like an action scene, they're like driving around, like things are going on, and you're just like, you're like, oh my god, I'm so into this. I'm like,
Yeah.
I got my sunglasses on. I'm freaking ready, man. Let's fight a Terminator. I'm just hit. I feel like he's not. I feel like he's only known for the Terminator themes. I don't
Yeah, you're
know.
right. It's sort of, it's not like a John Williams, like, where he's
Oh
made
no,
every theme
absolutely
to every
not.
movie. But yeah, but you're right. I can't, off the top of my head, probably think of anything else that I'm like, oh, okay, like, that's what he did. I mean, I'm sure there's so much that he did, but Terminator, the theme, is the one, like, that constantly plays in my head. Terminator, Jurassic Park, the Candyman theme, like, all
Oh
those sort of
god.
things. uh you know, and to be fair, like they're not even in my head. Sometimes I'll just be like, fuck it. And I'll be like shouting at like Google or Alexa or whatever, or Siri. And I'll be like, play Terminator theme. And then it will do it. But yeah, it's such a great theme. But as I said, for me, what I love about it is that how well it lends itself to the film itself, in regards to how it makes you, how it's an interpretation of how you're supposed to feel. Like that's when you know that you've got a masterful director, like we've already mentioned, and also a masterful person that understands how music, how score is supposed to work with scenes. Because there's so many movies that we get now where you're like, that's cool music, but it doesn't work for the scene. You know,
Right.
you wouldn't, you know, you don't need a big heavy score if two people are just talking. That don't work. So it's used expertly when it comes to the Terminator, and I like how the theme is used a lot within the movie, but in different ways. So, like, even when, you know, they're having, you know, sexy time and they're
That's what
having a
I was
game of
thinking.
sex, they're like, it's like a sexy version of that
Oh,
scene.
it's so good, but it literally makes me laugh every time I
Yes.
watch it. I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's not even the fact of, you know, you get to see Linda Hamilton in all of her glory, and but it's
Yeah.
like, no, that it's me listening to the score as they're going at it. You're like, I can't believe they did this, but it's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
good.
Brad Friedel was just like,
Like,
I'm going to take this score, take
oh, and
everything.
I'm like, what?
That's it. If people aren't listening to that score while doing the business, they're doing it all wrong.
Right, exactly.
That's it. But like I mentioned as well, that this film is a very dark movie, and it is a very very serious movie, and I really enjoy that aspect of it because once again, it's taken very seriously in every sort of aspect. And I really like that about this movie because yeah, you do feel like you're on a journey. You feel like you're on a bit of a ride with this movie, but it's an intense one, and it was definitely made to be that way. But it's exciting and intense at the same time, this movie. But what's cool is I like one of obviously the things that we always talk about and I love talking about is the performances in the movie. And this is another movie that you can't really like you can't fault the performances in this movie. Sometimes yeah, it's like quite cheesy and so on like that, but every time like they're doing something, it lends to this movie. Linda Hamilton is fantastic as Sarah Connor. She, you know, she brings that innocence. Obviously, you know, she becomes, you know, the absolute fucking badass in Terminator 2. But in this movie, she is very innocent, and the way that she's supposed to do it and the way she does it. And it's difficult to go, okay, somebody else could have done that better than Linda Hamilton because she does a really, really fantastic job. Um, Obviously Schwarzenegger obviously we'll talk about, but what I like about this as well is Michael Biehn as well. I think he's really really good in this because his intensity is like 11 out of 10 constantly,
Oh
like
yeah,
because he's constantly on edge because he's like because he what I like about it is that once again, this becomes another thing that you think about as you get older, or another thing that you think about after you've watched this movie, because you're like, he's not from this time. He's not from present day, obviously, back then. He's from the future wars, the cyber wars. So
yeah.
he's expecting every single second, he's expecting something bad to happen. So sometimes, like when you're watching like this movie, like you're like, oh god, like he doesn't like let up, you know, like he's everything he says, it's all like has to be now, and you know, it's very like abrupt and stuff like that. But that's because he knows his mission, he knows what's at stake, and I do sort of feel that that doesn't get as much respect as probably what it should. Because I think he's actually really good. Like the older I get, the more I get the choices that he made or Cameron was making him sort of do in the movie. Because when I first watched it, I did actually think that the way he was doing it was quite cheesy. But as I get older, I'm like, oh, okay, you know, it really makes sense now. It really does.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy his performance in it.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have to look at it as this is a guy who's in a future that is literally a wasteland. It is a an apocalyptic space, and he is being sent back to protect this woman so that it can prevent this from his world from happening, and that's all he knows. And so going back and kind of being the, what everyone else sees of him is crazy. Like when they get brought to the police station and he's being interrogated by one of my least favorite characters, but he's such a
Yeah,
slime ball, Dr.
yeah,
Silberman.
yeah. Piece
And
of shit.
yeah, he sucks, and he just keeps coming back. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, that motherfucker. Yeah,
like, oh man. But yeah, like everyone sees him as just a crazy guy. He's not the type of guy who's like, maybe I shouldn't talk about what the future is going to be in front of these people who don't know about it, because then I will sound crazy. Like, no, I'm going to speak the truth. There is a Terminator here. There is a robot who has been sent back in time to kill people, and they're just like, okay, buddy. But
yeah. And
it makes sense for where he comes
yes,
from.
yeah, yeah. And if he does do that, then everybody's fucked.
Yeah, if he
And
waits
he's
and
the
holds
only
up,
one that knows
yeah.
it. Yeah, he's the only one that knows it. He's the only one that knows the threat. So even when I was watching it the other day, the more and more I appreciate his performance in it, because as you get older, you understand more about, oh, okay, like this is why he's like that. And so yeah, so I really appreciate his performance now as I'm older, going, okay, I get it, and it makes sense, and it's actually makes the film so much better when you sort of understand that, and
Yeah.
you realize that that's what he's trying to do, and so on. But obviously, look, Arnold Schwarzenegger, this is an early Schwarzenegger movie, and this is another role where you're like, okay, this person was made to do it, and there is no other person that could have done what he did in this, but be what it is. Like, obviously, there were loads of people that originally, I think I've got it written down for a little bit later as to who the other people may have potentially been playing the Terminator and other characters within the
Oh my
movie.
god. Are we gonna talk
So I
about
won't,
the elephant in the room with the one
yeah,
of the choices?
yeah, but um, but this is, I do believe we've spoken about like how important and how integral James Cameron is, how integral the rest of the cast is, but I don't think that this film would have potentially have been or gone on to be what it is without Arnold Schwarzenegger, because he might not say much, but it's such an incredibly intimidating presence that, once again, like, I say this quite a lot, but like, someone like Freddy Krueger, I'm not scared of Freddy Krueger or people like that. What is scary to me is intimidation, like a giant, big, massive bastard that you can't do anything about. And this person is coming after you. There's nothing you can do about it, and that is what adds to this hypersensitivity of fear, and that's what Schwarzenegger does in this movie. Is that he, as a person, is so intimidating. He's creating that fear factor for this movie, and that's what is so fantastic about him in it. That even though he hardly says anything, he doesn't need to, because that's not his job. His job isn't to give these monologues and this crazy dialogue. His job is to scare the shit out of you. And he does it so well that this film, even though of everything that else that, of the aspects of it, if you didn't have Schwarzenegger in this role, and you had somebody else, and like some of the people I'll mention later, it wouldn't have worked anywhere near as well as having Schwarzenegger in as the Terminator.
Oh yeah, he's just so imposing. His stature and the way that they shot him. Like, I know, like,
Yeah,
Schwarzenegger is a tall guy, but the
six
way that they
two,
were, yeah. So they added some height to him by the way that they shot him. A lot of like higher
lower
angles
angles.
or
Yeah,
lower angles. Yeah, I don't know, up or down, whatever. But yeah, the lower angle shots, so it made him look more imposing and taller. And of course, he's a former bodybuilder, and I think he was still doing bodybuilding at the time, so he was still
yeah,
huge. And even like the fact that somebody can be so imposing, uh, even when they have like they're at their bare minimum. Like he literally, he shows up, he's naked, And like that's like one of those, I feel like for most people that's a vulnerable position to be in. You know, you have nothing, just down to your birthday suit, you know, and he's still just terrifying. Like he is sitting there with
Yeah.
his big old Arnold Schwarzenegger dong flowing in the wind, and he is able to scare the shit out of you. Like you're like,
Yeah, it's just
okay,
it's such an a great decision to go with because you know, I mean, literally by definition back then as well, like factually, he is seen as the perfect human outside of this movie. You know, winning
right?
Mr. Olympia and Mr. World or whatever it is, he's seen it. You know, factually as the perfect human being, and why wouldn't them as cybernetic organisms create the perfect looking human?
Exactly.
And that's the thing, you're exactly right, is that when he comes down, he's wearing nothing, but you're like almost in awe of the beauty of this fucking perfect specimen of a
Right.
man. And
Yeah, because
then
yeah,
it's so terrifying.
yeah, because and that's the beauty of this first scene when you see him show up and he walks over to the three punks and they're laughing at him because it's like this is the naked dude just walking around, and you're just like,
Yeah.
and as a viewer, you either have people who did react kind of the same way as those punks, or you were reacting like me, going, "It's not going to end well for you guys. Like
Yeah, yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
isn't going to end
Yeah.
well." And when you see that one guy get his literal heart ripped out of his chest, you're like, "Yep, everyone's screwed." Everyone's screwed. Like, there's no way you
Yeah,
can stop this
absolutely.
man. Like,
Yeah.
and
And it's just it's perfect. It's perfect casting, and it makes so much sense that and it's one of those moments where you're like, okay, if fate was a real thing, if it exists, if you believe in it, that was fate. Like
yeah,
that was it. You know, this started obviously Cameron's big career. This started Schwarzenegger's big career, but it's fate that it happened because it could have been so less imposing, so less scary with other people, and it works so much more for the movie that it's so great. And I think he's great in the movie as well. The turns that he does, you know, we all know Schwarzenegger isn't the greatest actor there is, but he doesn't need to be when he's been doing what he does.
but he's
But
fun to
even in this,
watch.
exactly, that's the thing with Schwarzenegger is that he's so much fun to watch that, and it's not as if he's bad. Like I mean, I still think he's absolutely fantastic in Predator. Like I think his
Oh yeah,
performance in Predator is fantastic.
he.
It's not as if you're like he's so shit.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
but the way he moves in this, there's so much. He's a big guy, obviously, but there's so much extra. It feels like there's that weight of the exoskeleton sort of thing inside of him. The way that he's moving, the way that he turns his head or the arm. Apart from when he's shooting a gun and he looks fucking stupid. Because there's the bit in like Tech Noir or whatever where he's got the gun and he's shooting it like, and he's got the Uzi, Uzi 9mm. But he doesn't look great shooting that gun, but it's still great, and he's great in it. So it's one of those things that when, like I've said before, and when I do this show, that every time I watch movies, I'm ticking boxes as I go along. That's just the way that my brain works. Like my structure of my brain goes. When I'm watching a movie, no matter what it is, I've got these tick boxes, and I'm like, okay, it's tick this box, it's tick this one, and this is another tick box where you like performances. You can't fault that; it gets a tick for it because it doesn't just understand that, or what it does understand what you need for these characters, and then they got the fate aspect of going, we got the right people to do those characters, and if we didn't, it would have been a different movie. So
mm-hmm.
it's, you know, the stars aligned, so to speak, when they made the casting, got the casting for this movie.
Oh yeah, I mean Schwarzenegger has proven that he could do any type of role. Like yeah, people mock his accent and all that stuff, and it's like it is what it is. But like he's always
Yeah,
been so much fun to watch. You know,
yeah,
like you said, his performance in Predator, and then he would go on to do movies like Kindergarten Cop and
yeah,
Twins, and
yeah,
you know those movies and Jingle All the Way, and movies where you're just like, that's the same guy who was the Terminator and fought a Predator, like, and he did and he was a blast in every one of those
Yeah,
movies. And it's
yeah.
so funny because I think as an actor, you always want to be remembered for the movies you do, of course, and hopefully your character, like as a person, you have people who are really good actors, but also just shitty people. I haven't heard terrible things about Schwarzenegger. I did watch that documentary that Netflix did on his career, and it was really well done. But he just, I think the fact of being remembered also for just iconic lines and all this extra stuff. I think Schwarzenegger could literally just, he doesn't have to do anything anymore. He has solidified his legacy, and the Terminator being kind of the tent pole of his. I mean, he did Conan before, but my favorite story is how he got the role. Like the fact that he had a meeting with Cameron, and Cameron initially wanted to be Kyle Reese.
Yeah, that's right.
Because
Yeah,
Kyle Reese was a bigger role, at least he thought, and then
he didn't want to do the Terminator bit. Yeah,
he was like, I think you'd be perfect as the villain, and he's like, well, it doesn't have many lines, and he's like, yeah, but you're gonna make it memorable. And that was kind of his thing, where he didn't give him an answer. He like went home, he
went
thought
away.
about
Yeah,
it for
that's
a
it.
bit, and then he literally called up Cameron, was like, sign me up, I'll do it.
Yeah. And once
And
again, it becomes about that thing where you're like, thank God he did, because
yes.
it made the movie better. It made Terminator 2 when we got that, and then obviously it created this career that we love so much,
Mhm.
and we love his movies and everything that he's done. And this, is at the start of it, almost like you're saying. Yes, he did the Conan before, and he did, Hercules in New York,
We don't need to talk
which
about that
is
one.
one of the greatest movies ever fucking made. It doesn't look anything like me. But I mean, that is, if you also anybody out there who's never seen Hercules New York and want to see a really bad Schwarzenegger movie that is so quotable and hilarious, and see him almost hit people that looks like he's going to hit them for real, um, go and watch Hercules in New York, because it's fucking great. And it's also got somebody in it who looks like a living version of a real turtle. So if that's not a reason to go and watch it, there's no reason to live.
That's awesome.
But but yeah, but yeah. I mean, look, that's enough about fucking Schwarzenegger. Basically, he's great. He's great in everything that he does, and it all sort of started here in, like you're saying, a completely different way. The trajectory of his career, the diversity of the movies he's made, not necessarily his performances, because we know it's Schwarzenegger, you're going to get an Arnold Schwarzenegger performance, but the diversity of the movies themselves is what really created so many of our childhoods.
Yep.
And we absolutely love him for that. I mean, Commando is one of my favorite movies ever, because it's so bad it's good, and it's so quotable. And once again, it's Schwarzenegger, and you wouldn't have been able to have that movie without him. It works, and that's it. So yeah, what he does for this movie once again is sort of underrated, in respect to how important it is to the movie itself. And that's what I keep on saying, and what I keep coming back to is, this is an expertly crafted movie, and that leads quite well into the aspect of the movie that I love, is that this is a perfectly crafted movie. I don't want to go back into talking about Cameron much, but if we're looking at this movie, everything makes sense. Everything's done for a reason. This movie is like aesthetically gorgeous,
Mm-hmm.
and I love how this movie looks. And in all honesty, it still looks good. There are moments in it that do not look great. For example, we know the ones that don't hold up necessarily, like the Arnold Schwarzenegger head in the mirror
I
with
don't
the
hate it.
eye.
I
No,
don't hate
I
it.
love it. No,
For
because also,
1984, I don't hate
yeah,
it.
exactly. And also, as well, when you're watching it, you know that once again, it was pioneering. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know that when you're watching it, they were creating things that hadn't been done before. When you create things that haven't been done before, it's not going to be perfect. You're learning from it. And like
Yep.
I said about Cameron, like I said about, people who were doing that, every time you do something for the first time, it's learning. It's not going to be perfect. So yes, there are moments in this movie where there's the moment where he's in the hotel room on his own before he tells that guy to fuck off or whatever. But even that bit, looks bad, but at the same time you forgive it because you know of the artistry
Yeah.
that went into it and the iconography of going, this is where things like this started. And if we didn't have the start of something like this in a movie like this, then we wouldn't have it in all these
Right.
other movies where it got better,
Yeah, because they were able.
and
Yeah, because they were able to look at this and those scenes specifically with the head, and it's like, how else were you going to do it back then? Like to make it look
yeah,
like where
exactly.
the human skin with the Terminator eye, but then they did it again in Terminator 2. It wasn't with the face, but it was with the arm. It looks
Yes, yeah.
awesome. It looks
Oh
so
yeah,
much better because they were able to take that and be like, all right, how do we make this better? And then you have
yeah,
almost a decade of time to be able to learn from other projects that you were able to do to be like, all right, we know how to do this.
yeah. Yeah, and even like, and there are moments that look great. Like, for example, there's the bit where his face is a bit messed up later on in the movie, and the underlining of the exoskeleton, whatever it's fucking called, that looks really cool, and they do a
Mm-hmm.
really good job of that. It's more of like a prosthetic sort of makeup sort of thing. But yeah, it just like I said, it's the moments in this, the things that don't look great, you still respect and appreciate it because it was a start for the things to come. And that's what I love. So you're right. Like when you sit there and watch it, like I watched it the other night and I was like, those bits, they don't hold up. But at the same time, you're like, but in regards to the impact that by doing that has, then that's the important thing to take from those moments. But then you get like amazing stuff. Like I still love all the stop motion in it. That looks
Oh, so
fantastic. Near
fun.
the end of the movie,
Yep.
where you've got the scariest fucking shit, where the T-800, the exoskeleton is coming. And yeah, and then my dog just walked in, the son of a bitch. But yeah, you get like the exoskeleton and everything like that. Um, Even that looks absolutely incredible, and it's actually terrifying still, and it just works. It looks so good. So this is one of those movies that aesthetically on all different levels looks absolutely fantastic, whether it's the special effects or whether it's the lighting, which choosing to like have this blue sort of cold futuristic sort of blue tint on it as well, with the color grading, that works fantastically. um it's just it's an expert in filmmaking. When you watch this movie, you know that the older you get and the more you understand about filmmaking, the more you understand how expertly crafted this is and how aesthetically gorgeous it is.
Oh yeah. I mean, he brought in Stan Winston to do a lot of the
Yes,
effects work,
the
and
greatest.
one of the greatest effects artists to ever live. And you just see, I know that I believe this was early in Stan Winston's career as well, so it was like you could seeing kind of his early work and kind of seeing how it evolves throughout his career. But like, man, that stop motion, I know people complain about the stop motion because it's like, oh, it's kind of off-putting, and it's like, well, what else did you want? Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
they could have gone
1984.
puppet wise, but it's like, you have to look at the time, you have to
Yeah,
see it's 1984. It's 40 years ago. Like,
yeah,
like
it's mad.
effects
Like when
work
you're
is
watching
so
movies
different.
like this, yeah, when you're watching movies like this, you have to watch them with like glasses that I've got on now, but they have to be like, dialed back to 1984, because we can't be watching movies from the 80s or the 70s or whatever with modern day eyes and go, it's got to look as good, it's got to look real, it's got to look as good. This is the
Yeah,
foundations of
yeah,
everything that we know now. And yeah, so stop motion was a huge part of movies back then, and it looks, I really enjoy it still. And because one, it does take you back to the time when they used it and we got it, but also I think it still moves and looks and works really, really well. But it
yeah,
still blends pretty well with when they move into the real T-800 and the physical version of it, smashing the shit out of a door, going on that thing, trying. And that's the thing as well, and that's one thing that obviously we'll get into when we're talking about the fact that this is a horror movie, or potentially a horror movie, is the Terminator itself. But yeah, but also what I love is and this movie has something that I truly love, and that is chase scenes in the 80s through the grimy streets.
Oh, so good.
There is something that about this that even in low budget movies, even in budget movies that have a bigger budget, there is something about America at the time in the 80s, night shots of cars having a car chase, police cars, all that sort of stuff. The way that it looks, the way that it's shot, literally, I don't know what it is, but it still to this day feels like it can't be replicated. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is, but
It's called guerrilla filmmaking. Did you know that?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why a lot of this movie is shot at night, because Cameron did a lot of these car chases weren't approved. They weren't.
They didn't get the permission planning and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
So guerrilla filmmaking, man. I think that's what's so great about these early films that were doing these type of chases, where it's just like, this wasn't allowed. They did it, and Cameron had to run. He had to go run and hide and make sure that the cops didn't get him.
That's it. Yeah. It's just so good, and those shots, like every time I watch them, I'm always in awe, like that cinematography wise, the aesthetical look of those cars, and do you know what? Like, there's actually more car chase scenes in this than what you expect from a low budget movie, and they all look great. Like everything in this movie looks great. And that's a testament to, obviously, like we've spoken to James Cameron, to his knowledge of technical filmmaking, of how he's constantly pushing the envelope of what you can do, making a movie and pioneering it. And one of the starts was this movie, and it really truly does show. And even to the little things in this. Now, this is something obviously you will notice. But it's something that I really love about little moments in movies like this. And that's when, we get the scene where we get the flash forward, so to speak, of when Carl Reese is in the future, and it's all fucked up, and, everybody's living in absolute shit. And there's the moment where he goes into where they all sort of live underground and so on. And you've got the dogs there, like the guard dog, so to speak, and he puts his hand in front so the dog knows that he's friendly, so he can smell that he's not a Terminator, he's not a threat, and the dog sniffs it and sort of licks it in a way and so on, and he goes on. Now, that's like a throwaway moment, but what I love is there's the moment later on when we're in, present day 1984, where they go to the hotel, and outside of that hotel is the dog. Now, the person that we're meant to be following is Linda Hamilton at that moment, because she's the one having a conversation. But next to her, when Carl Reese sees the dog, he does the same thing where he puts his hand out to the dog, and the dog sniffs it and does the same thing. And what I love about that's such incredible continuity, because when they're in the hotel, it's the dog that starts barking and leads them on to the fact that the Terminator's there, or shit's going to happen, that something bad is there. And I love moments like that in movies where you're like, they've given us a little glimpse of what happens in the future. Carl Reese is there, he puts his hand in front of the dog, but to show that he's not a threat, that's like instinct to Carl Reese as a character, to go and do that to the dog. The dog knows that he's not a threat, but now is fully aware of what a threat can be and is. And then that's essentially, so the dog, for him doing that, the dog is the reason that they sort of get out of that hotel room alive, because it warns them of the Terminator, the T-800 coming. And it's little moments in movies like that I love, where you're like, you overlook it. The first time you watch it, maybe the second time you watch it, you're like, oh, I didn't see that. And then over the years, as you watch it, little moments like that, where you're like, I overlooked that, I didn't notice it. But then you're like, that's such cool filmmaking continuity with character and the story, that I love little moments like that.
Yeah, especially when there's a lot of movies out there that can't keep continuity in their own films. You're just like, but you just did this, and like, why are we doing this now? That doesn't make sense of what you're trying to tell. But like, that's it's something that people, like you said, a lot of people probably did not notice. It was kind of just a throwaway thing, but to us, it's not, because it's like, it's a very important piece to this movie, and it's even just little things, like not even things that really play into what's going on, but like there's the scene where Kyle is explaining to Sarah kind of what's going on, and she's scared and doesn't know what's going on, and she bites him, and he's
Yeah.
like, Terminators can't feel pain, but I can. And that bite mark is on him the rest of the movie. There's
Yes.
a
Yeah.
shot. There's a shot later on where you actually see his hand, and it's just like perfect bite mark. And it's like those little things. I feel a lot of movies just weren't gonna do that. It's like, oh, well, that's just too much makeup work we got to do. It's like whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like even those little things, you're just like, oh shit, that bite mark is still there. Oh, that mark is still there.
Yeah.
And you got to give it to him, man. That's I think the what Cameron has always been good at
Yeah.
is continuity and kind of making sure those details are put in there, even if a lot of people aren't going to notice them.
Yeah, there's only, like, off the top of your head, there is only a handful of directors out there that you feel are capable of putting together a full movie like this.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was the 70s, it was the 80s, Spielberg, Carpenter, all that sort of stuff. They're the people that are paying. It's almost as if these movies, that they create are a part of them, and it's a part of them, and they understand every single minuscule aspect of it, of what's going to make it work. But also, it's not what's going to make it work on that level at that time. It's what's going to go on that we can sit here in 2024, like you were saying, like 40 years later, still talking about those tiny little bits. And that's what's absolutely incredible about all this, because you're like, how do you know that? Like, as a filmmaker, how do you know that you're going to create something now? Or even if you don't, you're like, you've created something back then that we still talk about 40 years later as going, it's still at the pinnacle of filmmaking. And that's absolutely insane.
Yeah,
Um,
how did you know? I mean, you don't know. There's no way he did know. I mean, you got to think he made this movie for little to nothing. I think the budget was $6.4 million, and it went on to make one of the greatest sequels, probably one of the greatest movies of all time.
yeah.
And then it went on to make 4 more sequels, which all made pretty decent amount of money, and a TV show. Like, there's no way you can envision that for making this movie for like nothing, back in
Yeah.
1984, and to be so iconic. And like I stated earlier, it's just not talked about as much, and it's such a shame because there's just so
Yeah.
many technical marvels coming out of this movie. We're talking about like the stop motion earlier, and I think one of my favorite shots is the future scenes where it would show it's all miniature work, and then they would rotoscope Kyle, and there was just like a random soldier with him driving and running or something, and it's just so well done, and you're just like, oh my god. And the thing of it is when you talk about like the scenes that didn't age well, the face scenes, I think what a lot of people don't understand is like 1984. This was even still early for VHS. Like,
Yeah.
so, but this is the format that they were meant to be on. You weren't meant to see those little tiny details. Like, when you watch this movie in HD, you can see Arnold Schwarzenegger's dick. And I'm not
Yeah,
trying to be
you
funny.
can.
Like, that's just
I
the
saw
thing
it.
that,
Yeah, I saw it the
yeah.
other night, and I was like, "That's the first time I've seen his dick."
If you watch the VHS, I doubt you're going to see it because that's just not like they didn't think that was going to be. Like, I watched it. I didn't
No.
watch it on a 4K disc. I watched it on a Blu-ray, but it was still so
Yeah.
high def. Like, it picks up a lot of things. And I think a lot of people, when they watch it, like, oh man, it just doesn't look good in high def. And I was like, because it wasn't meant to be in high def. It wasn't meant to be like that. Like, you have to realize what the time is, and it's the same thing with early CGI in the 90s. It's like people are like, oh man, the CG just doesn't age well. That's like, yeah, but it was also 1990 whatever. Like, CGI didn't become like huge until The Abyss, and then Jurassic Park put it under the stratosphere, and then people just always put it on a pedestal with Jurassic Park, and it's like, stop it. Stop doing
That's
that.
it.
Unless
And
you're
also,
Spawn.
once
Spawn
again,
CGI was garbage.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, Spawn was bad. But also, once again, we're talking about a person that, once again, was a pioneer
Right.
for CGI. Like you were saying with The Abyss, with Terminator 2, with, the physics and the engines that they were never created before he got involved and was just like, I want to do this. How do we do it? And then he got the right people to try and figure it out.
Yeah.
and then now look where we are because of it. It's just, movies like this are so important to the foundations of cinema, not just to horror or sci-fi or anything like this. Movies like this are important to the foundations of cinema, because it's not just about what we're seeing in regards to like the effects or stuff like that. It's to do with how well the story is. The idea, the concept, the originality and the uniqueness of this story itself is so good as well. That's another thing. The idea of the future, being what it is and destroyed by the cyber wars and being destroyed by computers, and we're fighting for survival. And now that's a scary thing for us, because we're like, shit, like this could happen. Back in the 80s, you're like, I mean, this is never going to happen. This is just a cool idea. And
Yep.
now we're sitting here and we're like, bloody hell, like James Cameron, I think, was right. Like, it wasn't a dream that he had, it was a premonition. Like, that's a scary thing. So, this movie really is one of those movies that started so much. It really is a movie that had such an impact at the time, but also now to this day, we're still feeling the impact of integral movies like The Terminator. And without them, we wouldn't have so much, or we wouldn't be as far along now as we are with the technology, if it wasn't because of people like Cameron and Stan Winston and all the people that were creating a movie like this, like The Terminator. It's crazy how important, like, the more you discuss it, the more you think about it, the more you're like, Jesus Christ, like, movies like this are so important.
Yeah. And that's why I love it so
Which is,
much.
yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I always have before we get into sort of overall sort of thoughts on the movie and all that sort of stuff, there's a few production info facts as well, some that we've always already sort of touched upon as well. In Rome, Italy, during the release of Piranha 2: The Spawning, director Cameron fell ill and had a dream about a metallic torso holding kitchen knives dragging itself from an explosion. Inspired by director John Carpenter. Oh, like, this is one of I put this in here as well because, once again, it's another almost like, look, it's a fucking horror movie or a horror adjacent movie. Just deal with it. But here we go. So it was inspired by director John Carpenter, who had made the slasher film Halloween on a low budget. Cameron used the dream as a launching pad to write a slasher-style film. Cameron's agent disliked the early concept of the horror film and requested that he work on something else. After this, Cameron dismissed his agent, which is a proper Cameron thing to do. But yeah, the multiple mentions of the fact that it's a horror movie in that sort of, just that on its own, and the fact that it's inspired by Halloween goes to show the horror themes throughout it and stuff are there for a reason, because it's so inspired by the genre itself.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a slasher to a degree. I mean, I wouldn't define it as a slasher, but the thing is if you, I mean, it's crazy because so many people say this isn't a horror movie. It's like, yeah, but what if you slapped a mask on him? Like, now it's a horror movie, right? Because he's wearing a mask. Like, no, like it's a literal cyborg coming back to kill. Like, his objective is to kill one person, and he takes out a lot. Like, in my eyes, that's horrific. It's terrifying to think about. Like, if it affects you in a way that a horror movie would affect you, it's a horror movie. It's the same with Silence of the Lambs for me. I the argument is like, Silence of the Lambs isn't a horror movie. It's like, why? It's a psychological thriller, but it's in the horror genre. Like, it's part of the horror genre. Like, it's terrifying because, for one, it's real life. That shit could happen. So it's that's terrifying. So why is that not a horror movie? That doesn't make sense. But
well, I mean, the way that I look at these sort of movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th and stuff like that, like, what is more terrifying than an unstoppable force?
Exactly.
And the way that and how scary that is, and how much of an impact that has on you. Because I think so many people get caught up on the fact that you have to be a ghost or a ghoul or a goblin or something supernatural for it to be a horror film. But for me, horror is about the way that it makes you feel. And if at any point that you're watching a movie and it gives you that sort of intimidation aspect, that fear, that terror, that threat, that dread, it for me that is horror, or it is a horror adjacent movie. And this, to me, I genuinely do believe that the Terminator, among being other things like an action movie and a sci-fi, I do genuinely believe that it belongs as part of the horror genre because of the themes, because of the story, because of the intimidating aspect of Schwarzenegger and how terrifying he is. You know, I'd rather be against, like I've said, Freddy Krueger than I would the fucking Terminator, you know. And that's just the way it is. So I genuinely believe that the Terminator is a horror movie, and there's always going to be people that don't agree with it, but that's what I think. I think it definitely works within the realms of the genre because of what it is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
One of the other things that Schwarzenegger's other commitments would make him unavailable for 9 months while he was filming Conan the Destroyer. During the waiting period, Cameron was contracted to write the script for Rambo First Blood Part 2. He refined the script for Terminator and met with producers David Giller, I always get it wrong, and Walter Hill to discuss a sequel to Alien, which became Aliens. So even though he couldn't do it, he was still busy. He was still working hard at doing loads of shit. I can't imagine James Cameron is one of those people that can sit still, because like you said earlier, if he's bored, he'd just get in a fucking submarine and go somewhere.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's it. As a relative novice filmmaker, studios did not want Cameron to direct the Terminator. However, he had a screenplay that everyone wanted. Cameron sold the rights to the script for $1 to producer Gale Ann Hurd. He did this in order to get the movie made with him as a director. So he believed in himself, he believed in the script and the idea so much that he was just like, you know, almost a Sylvester Stallone thing, where it's like, I'm doing this, I don't want anybody else to do it. This is my thing, this is my work, and nobody else is doing it. And I'll do whatever I have to make it. And thank fucking God he did. Where are we? Oh yeah, Cameron's first. So here we go. We're talking about a little bit about the potential sort of casting for the Terminator. So Cameron's first idea for the Terminator was thinking of Lance Henriksen for the role, and there are actually, I believe, artwork out there of him as the Terminator.
Wow.
Once again, like, I love Lance Henriksen, but it just wouldn't be what it is. And this is what I was saying earlier about how important Arnold Schwarzenegger is to the lasting legacy of this movie, because Lance Henriksen is Lance Henriksen. He would have been cool, he would have been good, but it wouldn't have been scary.
He wouldn't have been as imposing.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Another person considered for the role was O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
You know, thank God that didn't happen. But that was one of them. As were Sylvester Stallone, Michael Douglas, and Kevin Kline. And Mel Gibson turned down the part, as did Tom Selleck.
Kline?
So, yeah. Kevin Kline. It's mad. So it's absolutely insane that all of these people were considered to be the Terminator. But thank God it didn't happen, because, like I said, it's sort of fate that this is how it turned out and how it was created, and it became Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I think Sylvester Stallone would have been decent. I think if I were to see somebody else be the Terminator, which is funny because they had this huge rivalry for the majority of their career, and but you know, I think Sylvester Stallone could have done the job. I think he would later do like Judge Dredd, which was kind of in the same vein to not really, but I think he could have been that imposing figure out of all the other names you mentioned, like Kevin Kline. I'm still trying to wrap my head around Kevin Kline.
Yeah, like imagine, you can't imagine Kevin Kline. Like, you know, Stallone would have been like, "Hello, I'll be back." and stuff like that. Like that would, I don't know if it would have worked as much as
Yeah.
Schwarzenegger being that. But you're right. Like if you're going to go through any of them, Stallone's the one, isn't it? And also,
Yeah.
he did get his chance as well because in the last action hero,
Yep.
Schwarzenegger, Stallone is on the poster as playing Terminator, or in the standee as well, which is a nice, little thing as well. I think they even mention it in the movie as well. I think they say about Stallone playing.
He's like, oh, he's great in that. I think that
That's
Schwarzenegger
it.
says that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And it's I love it when they do those sort of things in movies. Also, an incredibly underrated movie, Last
Yes.
Action Hero. Love that movie. Not a lot of people have seen it. They should. It's a great movie. But yeah, so there's some facts. That's some production info on it. But obviously, there's so much more. If you want to find out more on the movie, just fucking Google it. There's absolutely loads. One thing, obviously, I want to know is overall thoughts. So this is where we get into our overall thoughts on the movie. Sort of very quickly. How do you? I always let my guests go first. So Parker, overall thoughts on the movie.
Overall, it still holds up 40 years later. The effects, even some of the ones that people don't like, I still enjoy it's one of those, as we stated before, it's one of those things where I can look at a movie that was made in 1984 and be like, okay, not everything is going to look perfect. But it's so dark. It's so gritty. All the performances are fantastic. We even get some fun little cameos. Like I love Dick Miller's cameo as the gun store owner.
And
he's
I feel so sorry for him.
Favorite. Yeah. He gets taken out pretty quickly. Seeing Lance Hendrickson in there, it's just cool. Early in his run of things that I had seen him in. Getting to see him later in Aliens, but the performances are fantastic. The effects are great. The atmosphere is just chilling. You could feel the griminess of LA in 1984. The music is spot on. It's just like, it's one of those things that I'll keep repeating. Like, I just really hate how underappreciated this movie is compared to Terminator 2. And I understand Terminator 2 is so good. It's almost perfect. But like, people really need to go back, rewatch this, and really just appreciate where it all began and just how good this movie is still 40 years later. I love it.
Yeah.
I will continue to watch it. I will continue to hum the theme song every time it pops into my head because it lives there, just like with you, BP. It's just like every I swear to God, random moments I was like,
yeah,
just like, am I doing that out loud? Like,
it's when the people next to you start doing it with you, and you're like, oh yeah, no, I was doing it out loud. But yeah, you're right, and I mean, honestly, I think we've already said it throughout it. You've just said it there, like. The thing to take away from this movie is understanding how good it is, how important it is, how integral it was and still is. The impact that this had on cinema is what is underlooked, which is what people aren't understanding. And I do believe that this is one of those movies that if you are like, this is a movie lover's movie. Like if you are somebody that loves, like for people like us who do podcasts about movies and truly love cinema and truly love movies for good or for bad, this is a movie for us, or people out there who truly love cinema, who truly love the beginnings of so much, who truly love the iconography of what it was and what it is now. Without a movie like Terminator, like I've already mentioned, we would not have what we have here if it wasn't for Schwarzenegger being who he was at the time and doing this and doing what he did with the role, as well as the other cast. Like I've already said, I think Michael Biehn is absolutely fantastic in this, and I love him in this. The older I get, the better his performance is in it for me. In fact, the older I get, the better this movie gets. And the better this movie gets, and the more I understand how important it is. That's what I always take away from this movie now. I watched it when I was 14 or 15. I loved it, but I couldn't see past Terminator 2. this film will always live in the shadow of Terminator 2. Because when you create a movie like Terminator 2 that's so good, that is known as the sequel, that is, you know, most commonly known as being better than the original, whether it is or not is down to, you know, I mean, that's subjective, you know, that's down to the person that watches these movies. There are always going to be people that love the first one more than the second and vice versa. But I do feel that this film will always live on in the shadows of Terminator 2. But that doesn't mean that this film is any lesser because of it, because we have so much to thank for Terminator that we wouldn't have in Terminator 2 for it. So I do genuinely believe that, like you're saying as well, I don't think that this film gets enough love for what it is. It's aesthetically gorgeous. The music's great, like you've mentioned. The performances are fantastic. James Cameron is a master already at his craft, creating one of his earliest movies, and he's gone on to help create cinema. You know,
Yep.
he's created so much. So this is one of those times in cinema, like we spoke about when we did The Shining, where a film comes along that is never going to be forgotten. It is a film that started so much, and it is a film that is always going to be, as far as I'm concerned, it's like studied, because it should be, because it's an example to filmmakers, to actors, to practical effect, people who create practical effects, to people who create scores. Like, this is one of those movies where you're like, every single aspect of it is the reason why it's so good. When I talk about those tick boxes earlier on, this is a movie that ticks every single one of those boxes. And then you go, that's why this film is now 40 years down the line and still considered that important and that integral and that good, that it still sits at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes and 8.1 or whatever it was on IMDb. It's so good that it's, like you're saying, I think it's underestimated sort of how good this movie is because of Terminator 2.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think that's also the same. You could say the same about Aliens. Kind of,
Yeah.
always, it's going to live in the shadow of Alien. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I will never argue with somebody if they think, like, when you always get those, you see those posts like, what's a sequel that's better than the original, and a lot of people would pick Terminator 2, and I would never argue with that statement, because I too think that Terminator 2 is a better movie overall. Like, I think it was Cameron seeing what he did with Terminator and then kind of perfecting it and creating one of the greatest movies of all time. But I will always be the one who's like, I would rather watch Terminator. I would rather watch Alien than Aliens or Terminator 2, because I just love that horror aspect of those movies compared to the more action-packed. As much as I love those two sequels and the action that it brings, I want that dark horror atmosphere of just not knowing what's going to happen next, even though you do.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's the thing. It's, obviously, being somebody that loves horror and obviously, hence I'm doing a fucking podcast all about horror. But yeah, those horror elements, those horror aspects are always things that are going to draw me to a movie. Like you're saying, that's one of the reasons why I love Alien more than Aliens. But this is, as I said, this to me feels very much like a horror movie. And it does a fantastic job, and I do absolutely love it. And it's one of those movies that you can put on whenever, and just it's funny actually. It's difficult to say to it, you enjoy this movie, but you enjoy it for a different aspect than you do a comedy or anything. You enjoy how this movie makes you feel, even though it's very claustrophobic how this film makes you feel, because of it's a constant dread, terror, it's constant even action, or it's the constant worry that the Terminator is going to be here or there. Obviously you've seen it a million times, like you said, we know what's going to happen, but our brains will always add those extra elements when we're watching it, going, but what if
Yeah.
what if something happened and we'd never seen it before? But films like this, that's the reason it does it. So it's absolutely phenomenal. The last thing about the movie itself, I always ask your favorite scene. If you have one, what's your favorite scene in the movie?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Um, I love the end. I love when when he crawls out of that blown up truck and he is just the exoskeleton of the Terminator, and then you get the whole
Yeah,
scene at the end. I mean, it's more than one scene, but the terrifying moment of like Kyle's dead, and it's her fighting, dealing with this now half of a Terminator and crawling through the different machines, and then I, I love her final line where
yeah, oh yeah,
he's
yeah. That's it.
reaching for her, and it's one of those things where she's like, "You're terminated, fucker," and just
Yeah,
pushes the button
Terminator, fucker.
and squishes it. I was like, so it's such a satisfying ending. But
Yeah,
it also makes you think of like, boy, this woman is gonna be scarred. And then you see Terminator
yeah,
2 is like,
yeah,
they did it right. It
yeah.
makes
They did
sense.
it. Yeah, exactly. Like, there's a reason why she's such a fucking badass, because she's been through the shit in the first one, and at the end, when she's like, "You terminated, motherfucker,"
Yeah, yeah,
it's such a great line to end it on. And the funny thing is that's what I've got as well. That's my favorite as well. I feel that that's like one of the most in like scariest sort of parts of the movie, because once again it comes down to this unstoppable force. That's the scary thing, because this thing will not give up. It's after her. It has a mission, and it's going to do everything it can to complete that mission. In other movies like Halloween, Michael Myers has his goal, and Jason has his goal, and so on like that. In Terminator, he has his mission, and he's got to do it, and he's got to carry out that mission. But what's even scarier is that he's a fucking metal exoskeleton, whatever it is, that you're like,
yep,
what? How the fuck do I stop this? Like, it's insane. And that scene as well, it constantly goes. He comes out the fire, and it looks incredible. And then they chases on. Then we get, Carl Reese dies, and then you're like, well, how's she going to survive this? She doesn't know what to do. And then we get the whole, that amazing shots of her crawling through the thing, and then it's after her, and you're like, oh, please don't get her. And then it sort of does, and you're like, oh, fuck. And then
yep.
she does the classic line. But yeah, you're right. Like, for me, that's the scene in the movie where you cannot stop watching it. Your eyes are glued to it, because even though you've seen it a million times, you're still in sort of awe of what you're watching on screen, from a technical aspect, and the fact that it's so well done and so well made and so well acted and so on. So yeah, I'm with you. The end scene in the movie is it's just so good. It's so good. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much it about the movie. Obviously, on the episodes, if you listen to them or watched them before, you know that I have a segment on it called Your First Time. BP, I don't need to ask you about yours, because we already know what yours is, because you did it on the Shining episode we did. But I've got one sent over from a fan. Well, probably not a fan. They probably fucking never listened. But they did send it over to me. But they've sent it over to me. This one was from Lulu Johnson. They sent it to me over on Instagram. You can follow them at Lulu _ Johnson. They put that my first horror movie memory, it was when they were about 7 or 8 years old. They turned on the TV, and what was on the screen was a bus driving down the street. I thought, oh yay, I made it in time to watch Saved by the Bell, which, one of the greatest programs of all time. I kept watching it, and the bus went off road and into the desert. I was thinking, okay, this is definitely not Saved by the Bell. Then the desert fell away from around it. I'm sure you're guessing what it is already.
Oh yeah.
And Freddy Krueger comes out with knives for fingers and kills everyone on board. I was so traumatized and scared, but liked the feeling. I didn't flirt with horror movies again until I was in high school, when I spent an entire summer watching one horror movie a day and was just hooked. That memory of me watching Nightmare on Elm Street 2 absolutely gave me my love for horror films, and I'm forever grateful to, in my opinion, one of the best horror films ever. Agree or disagree, that's up to you. I wish I could go back to that feeling of being a little kid and seeing it for the first time, where I was absolutely terrified, but so titillated. Good word. But but yeah, once again, like what a cool memory.
Oh
I love it.
yeah.
So thank you for Lulu Johnson for sending that over to me. If you want to appear on the show on that your first time segment, all you've got to do is head over to any of the social media platforms. You send them over to me. I'll read them out on the show. If they're longer like that, I'll just do one. If they've got shorter ones, I'll do 2 or 3. But we don't need to do yours, Parker, because we already know yours. But instead, do you know what? Instead of going through your first memory, give me a really quick recommendation for a movie.
Oh no.
This will catch you off.
My brain just broke. I'm trying to think of all the movies that I've watched lately. Oh God. Oh Lord. I'm breaking here.
If it's too much, I'll just move on.
Oh man. To be honest, I just watched a movie called Goodnight Mommy. It's a foreign film. They also did a American remake. I enjoyed it. It's a slow burn type movie. But I love the foreign horror movies. You know, Speak No Evil. I just saw within the last like 5-6 months, which was a really good one. I don't know if we really need an American remake, but yeah, check out. Literally, just look up foreign horror, and you're gonna find a good one because a lot of them don't get talked about.
The movies.
Yeah, a lot of them don't get talked about, and they're just so eerie, and just the way that filmmaking is done in these other countries is really, really interesting. So I just watched Goodnight Mommy. I don't know if people out there will like it based on how slow it is, but I recommend it for a one-time watch. So there you go.
Yeah, there we go. Well, sorry to spring that on you. I should have said about it, but I didn't. Okay. I didn't. Once again, I have no fucking idea what I'm doing on this. So
my brain just empties of information when people ask me certain questions. I'm like, oh.
Oh shit! But no, I'm the same. But you did it, and that's it. And then so that's it. So there's a recommendation. What I'm going to have to do is, if I have repeat guests on the show now going forward, I'm going to have to try and figure something out rather than make people just be on the spot and be like, I don't know. But there we go. So look, we've spoken about the Terminator. We've got everything, I think, out the way. Have you got anything else that you want to add about the Terminator? I think we pretty much said everything that we need to.
Linda Hamilton is fantastic. I don't think we talked enough about her. She does really good in this role. This was also early in her career, and her hair is insane in this. Definitely an 80s hairdo, and it has such as good of a performance as the person that it sits on. So Linda Hamilton.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, double thumbs up, Linda Hamilton. And once again, she helps being part of those tick boxes in my brain that have to happen. Yes. I said tick boxes, not tit boxes, for those dirty pervs out there that love that scene with Linda Hamilton. That probably was every teen's favourite scene with the sexy Terminator theme.
Yes,
that's it. But Parker, Brett, BP, it still confuses what I'm going to call you. I still haven't figured it out. It's still weird to me. But now's your time to promote everything that you do. Obviously, everybody is. If you've seen The Shining, you know. But right now, we want to know everything that you do.
Well, I am one of the 3 hosts of Dissect That Film. We're a podcast that dissects the plots of the good, the bad, and the ugly of cinema. I host it with my wonderful co-hosts Dan and Angela, and we literally just go through the plots of movies. We add some fun facts about the makings of the movies. We nitpick things that shouldn't be nitpicked, and we just kind of have a genuine conversation like we just did here, of just about the movies that are on our at our hands. And we also do other shows such as Out of the Tubi, where we pick a movie from Tubi that is related to maybe some of the movies that we've covered on the show. And we kind of do a similar thing with that. We do live streams at the end of the month where we kind of talk about the month of all of the episodes that we released that month. And trying to think of what else we do. And that's about it. We just talk a lot about movies. We used to do TV stuff, but maybe that'll come back later on. But mostly it is dissecting movies or film.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, like for me, not only just the novelty of the fact that we've got the same name and it's mad, but I love having conversations with you because, like I said, like we do podcasts about movies and stuff because we truly love movies, the good, the bad, whatever it is, we truly love it. So I love having conversations with you and everybody like within this sort of community that we have, because we get to do this. We get to sit here and we get to talk about stuff that we love, and that's why it's always really fun, like having a conversation with you. Because we got to we've already had a conversation about The Shining. We've had a conversation about the Terminator now.
Yes.
So Parker, I literally can't get your name because it's
but can I add a few things? I forgot to share where you can
find us. Yeah, go on.
You can find us. We have a link tree over. You can find us on all the social medias at Dissect That Film. Pretty much, if you type in Dissect That Film on Google, you'll probably find everything that has to do with us. And if you want more Terminator content from me and my co-host, we actually covered the entire Terminator franchise, movie by movie, over the course of how many movies are there? 7, 6, 7. So yeah, we started at the Terminator. We did that a couple years ago, and we went all the way through to Dark Fate. So if you want more Terminator, if you want to hear me talk more about the Terminator and all of its sequels, go find us over there. But yeah, thanks.
There you
thanks,
go.
BP.
That's it. No, that's it. We'll go. Everybody, go and do it. In regards to the Let's Talk Horror channel, in regards to the podcast, look, it's there. You're either watching this on the video version on the YouTube channel, and if you haven't subscribed, please make sure you do. If you're listening to it, then you're listening to it on any podcast platform. It is available on all of them. However you're doing it, whether however you're enjoying or hopefully enjoying the content, it means the absolute world to me. I know it means the world to Parker, Brett, BP, whatever. I can't fucking do it. It means the world to both of us that obviously everybody is enjoying the content, or as I said, hopefully enjoying the content. Obviously, a massive thank you to my patrons. Obviously, I always have to do. I've got some honorary creeps. Obviously, we've got Flicks and Friends. We've got Jamie Burns, aka Disco Doctor of Death. We've got Rob Miller, and we've got Leighton Collins as well. They are my honorary creeps so far. If you want to find out a little bit more about our Patreon, you can just head over to patreon.com and search for the Let's Talk Horror channel. Do you have a Patreon as well?
Yeah, we do.
Know. Yeah, there we go. So you can go over there. You can do that as well. Patreon is there for you just to show us how much you enjoy the content, to get exclusive stuff as well, exclusive to anybody that's on Patreon, and it just helps us along on our journeys. It's not integral, it's not something you have to do. All of this is still what it is. It's still free. It's just something there if you want to go, look, we love what you do, and that's it.
We got to pay for certain things to do podcasts, so it's nice to it helps us, be able to not stress about those little things. And it's one of those things you never pressure anyone into doing it, but if you can, it's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a huge motivator as well. People
Absolutely.
Watching, people listening is a motivator on its own. But having people to go that extra step to let us know how much they enjoy the content is incredible. And it's a huge motivator as well. But like I said, if no one does it, it doesn't mean anything, because the content is still there. We still are sitting here having a conversation about something we love, loving the conversation. Hopefully, I know I bloody enjoyed it. But everything is there, as we're on all the socials as well. Obviously, constant daily content I'm putting out there. And as I said, if you haven't yet, or on my show or Parker's show, please make sure you rate and review. This community is incredible, but you all play the biggest part in everything that we do. That's just a given. So the fact that you do support us on our journeys, continue to support us on our journeys, and hopefully continue to do, it means the world to us. So thank you once again, Parker, for coming on the Let's Talk Horror channel podcast. Thank you for being in the Creep Zone. And, obviously you'll be on the show many times in the future, and we've got to find one of your other favorite movies of all time to talk about.
It's so hard when you're like, hey, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, oh, crap. I gotta go through look. No, but seriously, thank you so much for having me on the show. It is always a blast talking to you and getting to talk about these wonderful movies. And your show is fantastic. People seriously need to listen to your show. I check it out every time something releases. I'm one of your listeners. So no, I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. I genuinely believe that your show is fantastic and you put a lot of heart behind your stuff. So please check out my Brett Parker brother from across the
Yeah.
pond. His show's fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, it means the world to me that my Brett Parker brother from across the pond still likes, the other Brett Parker's content, and likewise as well. Just enjoy both of our shows and enjoy our conversations that we truly love having. Until next time, though, stay creepy, fuckers.